Hello, everyone. Can people hear me? I just want to make sure that I'm able to get through here with some comments. I got a thumbs up. Okay, so it looks like the technical issues are now resolved. So for those of you that are on the West Coast, I'm giving this little 30-minute talk before your lunch. And for those of you on the East Coast, you've already eaten, so you're quite satiated. So let me get things started here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Delmar Larson. I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. I'm also the founder and CEO of LibreText. I am just talking a little bit today, maybe a lot today, but the rest of the conference, this is Justin, Jennifer's, and the rest of the team's uh, show, and I'm happy with how things have been progressing so far. So let's get things going. Uh, so the gist of this short little discussion is to talk about the synergy associated with the LibreVerse. Let me make sure this thing works. Uh, so as Justin mentioned before, the LibreVerse is this realization of um, of what we've been building over the last 18 years in terms of trying to build something that's capable in order to take the place of a commercial publisher. So commercial publishers come in and they provide faculty with not just here's a textbook, but here's a textbook and here's homework, here's ancillary materials, here's interactive. Now we say here's AI, and here's other these and that. So they provide this whole uh, cornucopia of resources. They get faculty connected into using these resources, and then to extricate the faculty from using those resources, you need to provide the full gamut in order to be able to do that. So that's the reason why we've expanded beyond just focusing on textbooks, which is how we started, into a full-blown ecosystem that we call the LibreVerse. And again, as Justin mentioned before, the ecosystem, this LibreVerse, can be found on the Launchpad, which you can see on most of the components of the LibreText websites as a little rocket ship in the upper left hand corner that includes applications and services at the top part here, and then down below has our 16 libraries that again Justin focused on and such. Goal of this little addendum to Justin's discussion is not necessarily to go over these things, although we can spend and we will be spending various times on each component of that. Is to just discuss how these things are connected. And as I mentioned at the title of this talk, when is a textbook not a textbook? It's clear to most people who are paying attention to the evolution of academic resources over the last decade or the last few decades is that the conventional textbook that we have out there as a paper-based book that students can cut through and write in and use is actually evolving significantly into capitalizing on technology in order to be able to advance learning or advance what we think is learning. Maybe it's not always fully justified in terms of well, meeting the technology that the that's right there. So nonetheless, um, and the answer to when the textbook is not a textbook is now. Um, so a lot of commercial publishers have transitioned into online textbooks as the primary mechanism for distribution. That then has the ability in order to take and merge the concept of a textbook with the concept of a homework system or any of these other components that they merge together into one big amalgam under the arguments that you're generating something that is the sum of let me phrase that, it is stronger than the sum of its parts. And we are similarly evolving in that direction. So as Justin did comment on, we have a range of different interactives that are available for authors in order to embed into textbooks. Basically, anything that you can have on a website, you can have on your textbook that you can access, at least online. It's more difficult if it's an interactive in order for it to be reflected in the physical book if you want to be able to get a copy of that, because that involves a different set of um, aspects that need to be addressed, but nonetheless, it's important in order to emphasize some of the capabilities on there. So one of the things that we have in the LibreVerse is the Studio, which you can see right here, or access right here. And the Studio is our H5P repository. This is a separate infrastructure that's meant in order to host H5P. H5P is a term that's meant in order to describe these little interactive widgets that were initially created by a company in um, Norway. Several years ago, it was purchased by Desire to Learn, a Canadian learning management system company. And the intent off of here is to make these little separable H5P interactives that you can move around in different spots in order to be able to engage it. So you can access that again via the Launchpad, or if you like, you can access it via the Studio directly, which I'm going to paste into the chat right here. And that's where you can actually come in and see these things. It's really quite interesting, the resources that you have available, and you can see this already makes your textbook engaging if you were to embed it into your textbook. There are issues associated with security. There are issues associated with accessibility that I can talk about in detail. It's one of the reasons why I personally am not that fond of H5P, but we understand that has its value and it's out there. So you can embed that into any of your books. This is an example of some H5P problems that have been embedded into an interactive Spanish book. This book right here is from Christina Moon, who's going to be speaking later on today from Chabot College. I'll paste an example of that into the chat. And the key point is that you can then interact with it. And I'm not going to emphasize that I can't speak Spanish, and then you get the more engaged interaction off of here, again, under the argument that the textbook is no longer the conventional textbook that we knew when we were students. So that's a simplified, let's say, low-level integration or synergy associated with the LibreVerse. The The next thing I want to talk about is embedding of questions that are in Adapt. So Adapt itself is a multifaceted system. I'll be discussing, or we'll be discussing it multiple times today. It can embed H5P and use H5P formatively, which means that we keep track of individual students' names and their scores, or it can be used summatively. Sorry, can be used summatively where we keep track of it. Formatively is largely where we don't keep track of it and you can just embed into your book. And that's very similar to what I showed here with the Spanish book that you have here. But Adapt can switch back and forth between the two. And we have the ability in order to embed Adapt questions. This right here is a question of this is an H5P question, very similar to what I showed before for Spanish. This is for Brian Linshield, who's going to be speaking, I believe, tomorrow. He is a nutrition instructor from Kansas State University, but he has two flavors of his books. He has one flavor that's meant for public access, where you can engage with these true false questions. The other one is where he actually uses the book as the homework system. So he substitutes into it a adapt question that's meant to be used summatively. A student needs to sign in. They can click on here. I can't click on here to show you what it looks like when you sign in because I'm not a student in this class. But when I do that, it's going to look just like this after it's released. But key point is then we keep track of it. So the homework and the textbook is the same for his class. And the argument that is done here is that if you if you look at how students interact with homework and how they interact with textbooks, over the last few years, they've been interacting with textbooks less and less. But they haven't been interacting with homework less and less because the homework is directly connected to grades. It is the carrot that entices students to interact with them. So if you can actually merge them together, you can provide a greater opportunity for students to engage with the content that's on the book instead of having a separate system that can be ignored. Uh, uh, there's essentially no study out there in order to be able to justify that statement, but I'm particularly interested in order to be able to deal with that. I'm going to paste into the chat the links to both of Brian's books, both the public one and the one that requires students to sign in order to do the homework. And the intent, again, off of this overview of things is to show you what you can do in order to expand beyond a more conventional, just textbook-based approach for doing things. Uh, Justin mentioned the Jupyter infrastructure. We did not build Jupyter. It was built from a variety of talented individuals. It's a useful infrastructure to facilitate coding. That's useful in computer design, in computer programming. It's useful in data science. This is an example of what's called a Jupyter Hub, which you can access uh, via the Launchpad right here. Uh, and you can make a notebook in order to be able to have students interact with it. And it's very engaging and it's really quite powerful off of here. However, we have the ability in order to take a Jupyter code and it can run in 30 different languages. Right now, we have about 5 different languages out there, including Python, Julia, R, Octave, C++, and you can embed those code bases into your book. So this is useful, obviously, for people who teach in data science or teach something that requires scientific study, scientific programming or conventional computer science programming, where your book then becomes a lot more dynamic. This is an example of a book that has embedded in R code for histograms, and it gives the ability in order to take your book and make it more engaging under the argument. The more engaging the book is, the more likely students are going to be learning, which is generally a one-to-one correspondence that's out there. I will also mention that I have done this for my upper divisional quantum mechanics class, and I'm going to be posting that link here and show it here once I actually get, there we go. So this is an example of Python. I'm not showing Python. It's not the point of the class as a quantum mechanics class, but it is an opportunity in order to create interacting widgets without having to go into a lot more complexity. In this case here, they can start to interact with these things. They can then run these code bases. They can interact with the code bases in order to be able to get various things that are out there. I'm not even reading this, and you can then look at the widgets that are out there. So you can make scientific coding as a principal component of your class. This is obviously most useful for the STEM fields, whether it's statistics or data that you're trying to analyze, or there's some sort of analytical process that you want to be able to get out there, and such. So I will mention something that's coming down the pike, and I don't have an ETA for that, and that's to integrate Jupyter into Adapt. So again, Adapt as the homework system provides an opportunity in order to facilitate auto-graded capabilities, open-ended graded capabilities, and Adapt can communicate to a learning management system. So for those who are in California, about 90% of California community colleges are already coupled into Adapt. So you can use it out of the box, so to say, so they can pass back scores directly to your learning management system. But Jupyter has an infrastructure that's meant for auto graded that we can then integrate into Adapt so that students can write code, whether it's for data analysis or whether it's for coding processes. You can make auto graded evaluation of that code, which is beyond what we can do what I want to talk about right now, and then pass back those tests to Adapt in order to be able to facilitate using of Jupyter in classes for grading purposes. And this sort of daisy chaining through Adapt as a central bridge to learning management systems is how we are building these things, because Adapt provides a convenient front end interface to learning management systems. And I'm hoping in order to get that out by the end of this year. We just submitted a proposal a couple weeks ago, hopefully to the federal government, that will give us some support in order to be able to facilitate that. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the Forge. So the Forge is right here, right next to Jupyter Hub. Forge, as Josh mentioned, is infrastructure to facilitate long form writing. Facilitates long form writing, and it also does analysis on the writing in order to identify how content was constructed, and use it as a mechanism to provide feedback to students, but also on their writing, but also to provide feedback on the origin of the source. For example, if they wrote content that happen to come from ChatGPT or other sources. It helps to identify that. It's not an AI detector per se, but it's meant in order to do an analysis of the stuff that's out there. This right here is a snippet of that, and Adapt can actually be, Forge can be integrated into Adapt, just like how we're going to be doing it with Jupyter. In this case here, this is what students see for the specific course. So I believe this is, well, there's a few things that this is an instructor view of it. It's not what students see, but it's mostly what students see, where they can click on here and it goes directly to the Forge, directly to the system that's on there. We're going to be expanding this in the next week or two in order to facilitate peer review infrastructure, and then grading individual students for peer review of their obvious peers. And that's important for facilitating um, a more effective open pedagogy tool if you're going to be using these things in order to do open pedagogy. And open pedagogy, if you're not familiar with that term, is using students to construct content that's openly licensed, that's meant in order to be able to be used in subsequent classes. Once we introduce Jupyter into the infrastructure, or any other technology that we're bringing into Adapt, and there's a range of technologies we're going to be advancing into that, then we can capitalize on what Adapt's infrastructure is to facilitate grading, whether that happens to be auto-graded or it happens to be open-ended grading. For example, in this case here, the rubric infrastructure that's available on Adapt, and such. So lastly, I want to talk about analytics. So we have lots of components in the LibreVerse. Students interact in a variety of different ways. And if the instructor decides that they do want to get information on how the students interact with the material, in order to either guide the development of that material to make it better, or to guide the students' performance, or to give students some descriptive understanding of their performance in the classroom, we can funnel those interactions into an analytics infrastructure. And this right here is just a snippet of the analytics infrastructure. This is relatively simple. That's out here, and it's just basically looking at different questions and different performance from an individual student and average. Slicing and dicing the data from different sources takes a bit of effort and presentation, and we're going to be updating that in the near future, with the goal in order to be able to not just identify a student's performances. This is going backwards. Not just identifying students' performances on individual questions, but then those questions are aligned to specific learning objectives. So you can start to introduce more advanced types of grading procedures like spec grading or contract grading, and in order to be able to ensure that the competencies are achieved in the course that you actually have out there. So in that case there, this is something how we're going to have this set up, so students can interact with the various sources of interactions to get to analytics. We also will have a few things that will be coming down the pike very soon. One is our annotation system using Nota Bene. It's a annotation system that's out of New York and is well designed for doing research and doing the analytical approach. We chose Nota Bene instead of Hypothesis because of the academic focus that they happen to have. We also have the ability, in order to track how students interact with the book, that's already folded into an analytics infrastructure, so you can identify if your class is reading your pages, if you ask them to read pages. And I emphasize these are our learning analytics. We also have traffic analytics to give you information. If you create a book, how many other people are accessing the book outside of our platform. It doesn't have sophisticated learning analytics in there, but that is available to people. And lastly, there's a small little icon right down here called Ask Benny, which I'll be talking about a little bit before. Ask Benny is our AI tutor. I shouldn't call it a tutor. It's more like a chat bot that's meant in order to digest a textbook and put it into an interface that you're able to interact with on a more engaging situation, so that the students can actually want to be engaged with the resources that's out there. It also is a very powerful infrastructure to do searches, and it provides an opportunity for chewing up not just your book, but all the books on a library or on a bookshelf. So, for example, if I were teaching a class dealing with just quantum mechanics and I have a range of quantum mechanics books, I can ask questions that will actually pull from the books across the whole bookshelf, give a response, and the attributions to where to go to those pages in those books in order to be able to handle that. That's just because academically you want to be able to have that sort of infrastructure in place instead of just spitting out stuff and then just hope that it happens to be right. And such. So with that, I'll end this overall discussion of the things that we're doing here, reiterating the point that I wanted to emphasize here is that the concept of a textbook is changing radically, and we're trying to make sure that that evolution is reflected in an open source, open infrastructure for OER that you're able to grab and run forward, and ultimately to provide a powerful infrastructure in order to take the place of commercial publishers in the classroom so that we are no longer gouging our students or gouging our campuses for money when we shouldn't have to do that, especially for public campuses. So with that, I will end the formal discussion. We have a few minutes left. I'm happy in order to go through some questions and from things in the chat. So Danya is Benny available for all LibreText in the library? It's currently available only for the chemistry and the math because those are the ones that we had set up with. We've had a request in order to be able to expand that into the humanities soon. It will be available soon. For everything, I do want to emphasize this one aspect that's there. All technology that we run, that anyone runs, costs money in order to operate. Um, and we have sustainability mechanisms in place, whether it has to be campuses that contribute a small amount of money in order to keep things going, or federal government or state governments that come in order to give us a significant amount of money for either development or maintenance. That's not any different for AI. So AI costs money, and we deliver about 250 million page views per year. If we were to open up Ask Benny to everyone who accesses our site, I would need millions and millions of dollars in order to be able to maintain that. So the Ask Benny infrastructure, when we do release it, will be available only to full LibreNet member campuses in order to maintain its infrastructure and support infrastructure out there. And that's just basically a reality of how to operate in order to make sure that it's sustainable and such, because there's a lot of fun stuff that you can get off of here, but because we operate without profit and because we operate without taxes off of here, we can reduce this to just the lowest amount possible in order to maintain it. So sorry, I transitioned a little bit into sustainability issues, which I'll be talking about a little bit later on. Are there any other questions that are connected here? That was the only questions off of there. I'm not sure if there's anything that's in the chat, and there are a few things that came up here. Adriana asked, does adapt integrations student responses into Canvas? So the interface to Canvas mostly is LTI. And LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability by One EdTech, is meant in order to facilitate scores going into learning management systems. The API, the Application Programming Interface, that supplements LTI does give us the ability in order to push various things more than scores, but we haven't started to use it in order to be able to address the other things that are out there. So the answer is probably, but we need to learn a little bit more about it, but not now. Right now, it's scores that are passed to LMSs. Devon Fard up in Shasta. Hi, Devon. Asked, how do we know if your campus is a LibreNet member? You can ask us. Shasta is not a LibreNet member. It's an affiliate member as part of the California Community College system, since I know where you're from. Justin mentioned a few things. There are a few things that are up here. I think most of them are commentary out here. Sharbani mentioned, how do we get these assignments? I'm looking for biology. Are you looking for assignments in ADAPT? Is that the context of the question, Sharbani? I guess you can't ask questions in the system. You have to do it only by text. Yes. So when you actually go to ADAPT, and actually, let's postpone this. You're going to have 3 sessions later on today dealing with ADAPT You'll cut through that. Just make sure you have a LibreNet account, and then you'll have access to the full scope of 320,000 questions and growing rapidly. So I don't need to repeat it there. I think everybody else largely did their communications up here. Thank you very much for sitting through this sort of quick overview of the synergy that's associated with the Libreverse. I hope that if you weren't familiar with the Libreverse, you have a better understanding behind that, and also have a better understanding about where we're going in terms of building the Libreverse and making sure that the components of the Libreverse are not individual standalone infrastructures, but are help to generate something that is far greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that we're getting there. I'm very happy with that. And for people who've been watching our evolution for the last decade or close to 2 decades, it certainly has been quite a ride. And the future is open. So with that, thank you very much. And I believe we have a little bit of time before the next schedule. Justin, do you want to step in order to be able to give some context?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the next session is actually coming up real quick. It's right on the hour, and it is with Sarah Harmon talking about implementing ADAPT in her humanities course. That is definitely a session where you can bring your lunch, sit down, and listen to her chat. And then immediately after that, and a half hour is our first serendipity session, our speed networking. So make sure that you're back there to join that one-on-one chat session. So with that, I'm going to go and close this one off.